I think that it's wonderful to have an opportunity for tools that, and especially the bilingual presentation, which I think is incredibly important, that covers really basics that every business needs to know, but really blends that together with an understanding of family values and why that is important, that we consider the integration of our family values and cultures with how we run our businesses and how we interact with our families and those around us. So thank you for the leadership role in bringing this book to us, and I hope that we have an opportunity to learn more today.
Thank you so much for having us here this morning. Gracias a todos. Bienvenidos, those of you that speak Spanish. This is very much a privilege for us. This was a labor of love in reading this book, in writing this book, and we've very much enjoyed it and are happy to be here with you. Just to give you some idea of why we think the book matters, and there are so many reasons. So we really had some discussions between ourselves. Dr. Rivera and I have had many hours that we've worked in just preparing this. And some of the information that we were able to get that is very much current that I wanted to share with you is it matters because one, the U.S. Hispanic population has surpassed 60 million in 2019. And that is very significant because the numbers are very large. And if you would see a graph, you would see that the numbers beginning as far as 1970 when it was 10 million, 1980, 14 million, 1990, 22 million, 2000, 35, it just keeps escalating. And so it's a very important group. In addition to that, it's important to note that the title is very applicable here because what we have found, and this is information from the Pew Research Center, the southern part of the United States is actually where the Hispanic population is, or Latino population, we use that interchangeably, is growing tremendously. And it's followed by the Midwest and then the Northeast of the US and of course the West. The West because we have large numbers of Latino population, especially in LA and in San Diego and in Maricopa County. Maricopa County is quite dear to me. I went to ASU as an undergrad, and it's amazing to me how it's grown even today. When we were looking at some of this data, we found that it was a county that has some very large numbers in terms of Hispanic population. The Pew Center shows it at 1,410,000, which is very large. So more specific to our state, it's very important because we are a large part of this population. It is important to note that we are, in terms of the US Census, we show 49.3% in New Mexico, which is quite significant. And so that is another reason why it matters and is specific to us. And we will share with you some examples, powerful examples, we feel, of clients that we've worked with to bring this closer to home. There is some survey data also that we looked at that came from Stanford out of an initiative of Latinos that they have. And they point to the impact of Latinos in the economy as a whole, contributing $470 billion in revenue in 2016 alone. And that is significant. So there's a tremendous impact there. And they do also account for 5.5% of all US employment. So again, the numbers on a national level. The USBA, the US Small Business Administration, I should say, also points to Latino business owners having grown tremendously over the past 10 years. And especially in terms of an ethnic group, the ethnic group that is contributing most to startup businesses. That's important. We also have information more specific to folks that are young Latinos who may be part of DACA. Numbers are significant there too. 5% of DACA recipients under 25 that started small businesses, and 8% of dreamers. And that should be interesting as we go forward in the years to come. So it does matter. Dr. Rivera?
Well, thank you for having us. Before I talk about our own personal experiences and why this book has mattered enough to us to go through writing it and putting in, trying to share the information with other people. I want to thank UNM for Marlene and both Doctors Montoya. Dean Montoya, thank you for your support. We really appreciate it. You're a very busy person, so I appreciate that you were able to take the time to look through it and understand the intent, which you absolutely hit on the head. Our intent was a practical, less academically based approach that can be used by the community at large. It's not a huge book. It is one they can write in. It's one they can share. It's easily accessible. And we'll talk about how that came to be. But we also wanted to share some reasons why personally, this was not just something that felt like an assignment. This has been, like Dr. Lozano was saying, a work of love. It really has been. I'm a clinical psychologist, a licensed psychologist, like you, Dr. Dean Montoya. I think you and I walked on the same campus, not at the same time, I don't think, but I went to school at Michigan State. I'm a native of New Mexico. I'm a native of Santa Fe, born and raised just up the road. We live here in Albuquerque. But I've lived different places, and that has been a huge opportunity for me to understand how we are all very much the same and we are all very different. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we talk about, how we developed the book. But basically, I've done everything from state-based administration of big federal grants to flow-through grants that go through the state for child development. And I've have years of doing assessment, intervention, and training with adults, adolescents, and children, many of them Latino, since I am able to converse with them in Spanish and understand the nuances that psychotherapy and, frankly, mental health education, which is really where we need to move a lot of our work. Because I'm able to share that in the language with which they're most comfortable, assuming it's either English or Spanish. That has brought to me many clients, which was good, including all the years that I worked while I was in graduate school in Michigan State in the Mexican community in North Lansing. And so currently, I'm doing my work, as are all mental health people, via telehealth. We're not seeing clients in person, and folks have kind of gotten the hang of it after this year of doing that. So I still see mostly adults. I'm not working currently with children, but I have extensive experience with children and adolescents. And what I'm doing a lot of that has really helped inform this book as well is that I do psychological assessments that are used in immigration applications. And many of them are for waivers of immigration, where a spouse or other relative who is a U.S. citizen sponsors an undocumented immigrant who is seeking legalization here in the United States. And the whole purpose of a waiver is to prove hardship if they are not permitted, hardship to the sponsoring party if they're not allowed to stay. I understand that a lot of people who may be tuned in understand these distinctions, but there are various different reasons. Some of them are they're able to apply for citizenship under VAWA, which is violence against women, and others, they can do U visas, which are the witnessing of a crime or the being a victim of a crime while here and being able to help prosecute that. So I do the psychological assessments. And so it is an up close and personal look at someone's life someone who has taken the chance of coming here and has taken the chance of stepping forth and building a life here. Some have been here since they were infants. Some have been here 3 years and are adults. So it's all ages. They're adults. Okay, these sponsoring people are all adults. But most recently, that's what I see. And I also see a lot of U.S. born Latinos in my full range of practice, whether it's dealing with families, dealing with individuals, or these immigration cases. And then I'll stop talking about my work and we'll go into the classes that we did that helped give rise to this material. But I did a lot of work with court-ordered people when I was with the local mental health center. And the court would send folks, and they were basically families in conflict. They were blended families, or they were families that were no longer living together because of divorce or separation. And very often, it was a blending of culture, it was a blending of economic levels, it was the conflict of cultural values, of background. And that really led for interesting look at the conflict that occurs personally as well as socially and economically. So that's where I come from. That's why this book has mattered to me. I'll let Dr. Lozano talk a little bit about the work he's done.
Well, my work started many, many years ago, and I've actually had two lives, I guess, if you might say. Back out of ASU in the early years, there was an initiative by the Office of Minority Business Enterprise for 24 offices throughout the country, and our efforts were to put together business loan packages and advocate for small businesses with the commercial banks, which led me into commercial banking. So in commercial banking, I was privileged to see many different things in the lending area, and in Arizona to manage a portfolio of businesses that are Mexican owners, grupos, if you will, that's what they called them, and we would do specialty financing. And that led me to believe that there really are diverse groups of people that have access to funding. The folks who were dealing in the bank, they had money. They knew how to manage it. They were bilingual, which was very interesting to me. And so I learned a lot doing that also. And so I've always had a love for that coming to New Mexico. And I don't know, we haven't really shared, but Dr. Rivera and I have been married for many, many years now. And what brought me to New Mexico was this beautiful state, was to be here. And we've been here since 1991. And it was family that brought us here, right? So familia matters, right? It really is important. We sort of left everything we had. It was like, I use the example of the Beverly Hillbillies. We sort of packed up the car, right? Loaded everything up, and here we came. So I spent many years at CNM as the lead in international business development there, and as what they call a course owner for entrepreneurship. And what I would find in coordinating work with publishers and trying to get books on entrepreneurship is they were very academic in terms of the textual material and presenting what entrepreneurs should be. And we would talk, and I'd say there's some elements that are missing here, and they certainly don't focus on Latinos and what Latinos are doing or what they need. So many years later, I always had collaboration with organizations outside of CNM, and one was the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber. And they came and actually said to us, or actually said to me at the time, we have a need to have someone talk to monolingual immigrants that are coming to us from Central America, from Mexico, Venezuela, and they need someone to train them on the basic aspects of how you put a business plan together. These are folks that are working during the day. They can't come to class during the day, but they're willing to come at night. So this is the way they overcame their hardship and adversity. They would go beyond what they were doing. And so we created, initially I was able to put together somewhat of a business plan that focused on what's your mission, what's your vision, but was part of it, what's your market, how are you going to manage all this, what's your cash flow. And we did this in Spanish, okay? So it was very interesting. I did it by basically translating and delivering it in Spanish. Y también prefiero hacerlo en español, si prefieren ustedes. Lo puedo hacer, los tópicos, no tengo problema con eso. So I can do it bilingually. What I found was that they would come and they'd say, well, you know, my family says this. What about culturally? I don't understand this culture. It seems very, very hard to me when we come here, and very cold. Thank you, Dr. Rivera. It's very cold to us. What's the problem? We want to do business with a larger market. And that's how Dr. Rivera came into play. I would come and I'd say, gee, there's something missing here. And we took that curriculum, the Emprendedores, and basically Dr. Rivera brought in and developed the family and the culture perspective. And we did that. And as a result of that, the Hispano Chamber won a national award amongst chambers throughout the country. And we did that for a number of years. Dr. Rivera, do you want to?
No, it was an interesting experience because Dr. Lozano presented the Emprendedores curriculum many times before I was on the scene. He and I did that for a little over a year, I think I would say. But
yes,
the thing that was most obvious is the people who attended, and we started out with Spanish speakers, and then eventually U.S. born Latinos that also belonged to the chamber began attending.
yes.
So it kind of became a mixture of people. Frankly, some spoke no Spanish, but were very willing to try to grasp as much as they could. We had a few non-Latinos that wanted to be able to really work with the Latino community.
Exactly.
And so they knew that the classes would be relevant too. And so that is how we decided, well, this is important. This is what we need to include in the book, that it be relevant, not just to the person who has recently arrived, but those who have lived here, perhaps owned businesses before. And then for those who are not Latinos, so that was part of it. There were a couple of particular stories that I kind of wanted to share in terms of, besides the classes, in working with clients, to jump back to people that I've worked with. One in particular comes to mind more recently, in which I was asked to do a psychological assessment in the case of a sponsoring Latino who was in a gay marriage, and both men were from Mexico, and they are living in Nebraska. They began and met each other in Colorado, but then found that economically they knew what their goals were. They want to be business owners, both of them. They want to be restaurateurs, and that's been their life experience. They're very young, but Denver was too expensive. And so they left their lifestyle in terms of eating out and all the money spending they were doing, according to what I was told, and went to Nebraska, where they have really reined all that in and developed their funds so that they can start with their own money to build and open their businesses. And their long-term goal is to own more than one restaurant and different types of food service. So again, in the classes that we taught, we had people that, women that came in, they were single mothers, and they were going to sell their empanadas, quite frankly. They were going to sell their empanadas, and they wanted to make a business. Others had entered into contracts that they were not fully versed in, and some were housekeeping type of services. Others were in multi-level marketing. And that's a whole nother tale of helping people understand that. And Dr. Lozano was so important in helping them understand the ins and outs of all those. So I just wanted to share those before we got too much further into how we began to actually put the book together.
And so how the book came to be is Very interesting. We after these experiences that we had, and it wasn't just these experiences, but an accumulation of experiences in our prior work with Latinos and in our readings, reading both the literature, popular literature, some academic type articles. We began to kind of put a framework together of what we would like to do, and that was a real challenge. Finding a publisher was interesting, and in fact, we reached out to Dean Torres, Cheo Torres at Student Affairs, and he was helpful in connecting us with Vice President Cheo Torres, in connecting us with the publisher, Kendall Hunt, and so they sent a representative who we met with, and this is why we were still teaching the Emprendedores. And asked us if we would be interested in writing a book because of the tremendous need that they saw across the country. And so that sort of led to the title, the U.S. Latino Entrepreneur's Guide. We wanted to be inclusive, and we recognize that there are diverse, when you say Latinos, that encompasses a lot of different groups from different countries. And we wanted to be respectful for that. So we needed to meet several times with the representative, the publisher's representative, and sort of describe what our ideas were. And of course, they shared with us what they thought they wanted to see, what would work. One thing I want to know before I'll turn it back to Dr. Rivera is we didn't want to limit it to an academic setting. We wanted to also have it available to chambers of commerce, because I think it's important to note that this is not just for Latinos. This is for folks that are non-Latinos that want to do business with Latinos. Folks that say, gee, I know that Latinos are out there, but I don't understand the culture. I don't understand some of the Spanish that they use. Well, here you have an opportunity to learn. That would be my message to them.
It was interesting in working with Kendall Hunt. They were very responsive. They were very fair in terms of giving us rein to outline what we needed and what we wanted, and share with them our vision of what we need, what we had intend to do and to share with people. We were different for Kendall Hunt in that they are historically they are a textbook publisher.
Yes.
And so for them to understand that we're not just doing the traditional selling to academic institutions, but instead it's a broader community, has been a broadening of their scope as well, which we've appreciated doing. So to be able to do what is done traditionally and then kind of morph it a little bit into what we're doing with the community has been very helpful for them. Currently, just FYI as an aside, the book will be listed on Amazon, but currently it's only listed on the Kendall Hunt publisher's website where people can purchase it, both in hard copy as well as digital. And so I say, I'm like Charlie Brown, if y'all remember Charlie Brown, going to look for his Valentines in the mailbox. I go to Amazon and Google us, and if it doesn't pop up, the difficulty is Amazon is so large that the swiftness of their response has been slow, not swift. And so we're still waiting for it to be listed. It is going to be listed, and they have submitted all the paperwork to Amazon. But the publisher Kendall Hunt doesn't have any control over the speed at which Amazon puts things up or not. And we know how this year has ensued the burden on, cyber work. So just know that. We gathered all our curriculum materials that we had shared. We outlined what we thought the important lessons were, and sat down to write. After it was drafted and worked over. And it was interesting because we blended what people would look at more as the social science end of things, the culture and the family, et cetera, and the values, with the technical part of the business. So it was, how do you make the transition within the book itself so that it all fits together? And that was a challenge. But after it was written, Joshua Baca, who was our agent with Kendall Hunt, he facilitated us setting up focus groups.
Right.
And so we were able to have input, review and input from a broad base of people at UTEP in El Paso. We had people from the College of Business, and we had people from the community. We had others who were from Chicano studies. So we had a broad base from women's studies. And it was interesting. We considered those and took some of their feedback and made changes accordingly. Of course, I am comfortable in speaking Spanish and can read it, but knew that we really needed to get a translator to translate the text for us. Because all the reasons we could sit here and discuss about which Spanish is it? Is it going to be New Mexico Spanish? Is it going to be Southern Arizona Spanish? Are we going to speak Spanish of Michigan? Where are we going to speak Spanish from? Because we all know the story of what Spanish are you speaking and what word was that? And we were very fortunate to be introduced to Mario Belangel Guevara. He is a very skilled translator, doctoral student. If I haven't talked with him lately, so he may have already received his doctorate at UNM. So I'm sure some of you know him. Unfortunately, the credit did not make it into the book, all his work, but we will give him the credit on the website and as we go forth promoting the book. So our thanks go to him. Excellent work, excellent character, which is hard because he listened to us so that our vision and mission became his in getting it done, and he was able to balance it out. So again, these are some of the challenges we faced.
Let me share a little bit. When I see determining the scope of the book, one of the things that comes to mind is that we wanted to have something that was practical and useful for the population, the Latino population, and again, we were drawing from our experiences. And the resource, I was privileged to attend an LAII Institute curriculum that was teaching what's called the entrepreneurial mindset out of Kansas City back in 2014. And that becomes the basis for the first chapter, because what we wanted to do was introduce those that read the book to the idea that they have to have, or should work towards having a mindset rather than focusing on the things that we had experienced, and I in particular as a lender, which was pretty much, hey, I don't start a business because I don't have any money, or lend me some money and I can do it. And my experience has been the initial problem is not money, it's being clear on what you want to do, being clear on what your passion is. And this book, or this training really brought that forth. In that training, as an entrepreneurial mindset facilitator, I learned basically to use a book that had been based on surveying entrepreneurs who had experienced hardship and adversity. The name of the book is Who Owns the Ice House? It's 8 life lessons that were 8 themes that seemed to go across those entrepreneurs as they were interviewed and surveyed. And they are in the first chapter, and I won't go through all of them, but the first one is choice. And we found in our teaching, in our trainings, if you will, that's very, very true. And that anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur, whether they're immigrant, whether they're Latinos that were born in the US, whether they're non-Latinos, the hardest part is the initial, I have a choice to make. And I can say, no, I don't want to be an entrepreneur, or I'm going to take it on and do whatever it takes to be successful. And so these were 8 lessons that had been not adapted to the Spanish-speaking community. And so we took that on. We thought that was very important. that those lessons, to build on those and adapt to those that speak Spanish.
So as the reader goes through and sees the life lessons from what first chapter on through the entire book, they can see how we've brought in the cultural implications,
Yes.
and the cultural values to all of those things, whether it's vision and mission and all the very basics that we know of entrepreneurship, but how it is similar and how it is different, and what needs to be considered with cultural values and families and the balance therein. So that was important. What to include? You start writing this material and you think, oh gosh, this is getting away from us here. We're going to end up with a big old book, and that wasn't the intent. Remember, the intent was to have a simple type of guide, and so we pared it down, and I think we focused it pretty well in that way. Did you want to talk any more about what was in the chapters very briefly, or should we go on to the text?
Well, yeah, I think here's an example of chapter 1. And in chapter 1, of course, is in writing, we felt it was important to capture the reader immediately. And what apparently does is the fact that it is on the left side, it's chapter 1 in English, and on the right side of, as you open the book, is the Spanish part. And so we've gotten a lot of good feedback from people who say, gee, this is great. It's helping me to understand Spanish words that are exactly the same text that you find in the English part on the left-hand side. So I think that was really important.
We wanted it to be a teaching tool.
We wanted it to be a teaching tool.
Because often people who predominantly speak English will be reading along the left side, or they'll be speaking in Spanish to somebody conversationally, right, and you hit a technical word, como se dice, you know, that kind of thing. Right. And it goes the other way too. So because we were able to do parallel text like this, which I have to tell you was a real challenge, because Kendall Hunt did as well as they could, but they weren't Spanish speakers taking and lining up these. So we went through in proofing and lined everything up. It gave us an opportunity to really say, oh, look how this is falling in place. And we were very, very pleased with how it is parallel across each other. That was the intent. And we really think that people can go from one language to another and self-guide. Okay, remember that the goal is to have a practical self-guide. So we're pleased with that as well. And we have, as Dr. Lozano started to say, we begin with the guiding questions in
yes,
each chapter, and then we include exercises.
Yes.
This particular chapter asks the person to ask themselves, why are you doing this?
Right. And
a lot of people will start with, well, I need to earn money. Well, what else? Basically, because that way they begin to think, how does this fit in with my life besides paying the rent or the mortgage or helping the family back home? And that was really crucial, because a lot of people had not looked at how were they raised, what financial literacy did they come with, what were they taught about money as youngsters growing up, what have they been doing financially, and they were not disclosing deep information financially, but the questions they would ask informed us about what they were needing and how is it different. They would say, well, in our country, we do it this way. And Dr. Lozano would say, okay, listen carefully, and then say, this is how it works here. So it was parallel teaching, and it was also the parallel text that you see before you. So I really am excited too about this parallel text.
The other thing that I want to share with this, where this is useful, is currently I'm consulting with an alternative lender in New Mexico that's considered an alternative lender because they're alternative to the traditional commercial lenders that are throughout our country. And so there's more flexibility. But the important thing to note here is that group, there are a lot of existing business people that are Latino and non-Latino. And the feedback has been very good from them too, because it helps them reframe why they're doing whatever they're doing and be clear on the idea that these are important parts of any entrepreneurship idea.
And how they measure success.
True.
Besides money, what does it mean to
Well,
them?
and even within the book, we talk about what wealth is, and wealth is many things. We all need to understand that, and so we introduce that idea to the reader.
That's a really wonderful and thorough evaluation of the book and why it came to be. And one of the things that I've, before I continue, I do want to thank Director Hayashida and all of LAII, particularly Marlene, for hosting and organizing the event. I really appreciate that. I'm going to ask Dean Montoya to ask the leading question, the first question, and then I invite any of you to either use the raise hand function or the chat function to ask a question, and I can either direct it to you to ask the question at that point, or I can read your question off of the chat bar. I will say one thing before I ask Dean Montoya for the question. I found chapter 3 to be one of the most powerful elements, and that is the chapter that says understanding your market and building customer relationships. But the way that you situated it, it's one of the things that I've often thought was the biggest challenge for business schools and also just for the entrepreneurship community to support immigrants particularly, is that it's very hard to communicate how a market itself is a community. And in and of itself, I think that that's a really, really important way to start talking about values and value-based economic choices that occur. So I really like the way that you create that dynamic and the discussion that then kind of situates this question of a market as a community so that people feel more comfortable thinking about these technical terms of target market. So I really appreciated that aspect. But I know that Dean Montoya has a question to start off this discussion, and then we'll open it up to the audience.
Thank you, and thank you both. I loved hearing the story of how the book came about, and I would be remiss if I didn't say go Spartans. So that's required. Go green, and you have to answer go white. So that's
Right.
I also worked at
Party.
I worked at Arizona State University as well. So I feel, as always in New Mexico, we're all connected. So I think that's wonderful.
Thank you.
I actually was going to say something along the lines that that Dr. Montoya raised, which is one, what really intrigued me about the book were the self-assessments. So there were lots of thought prompts for an individual, but also I think prompts that ultimately probably would lead to some great family conversations, right? So it's not just me thinking about myself, but I'm inviting my family into conversation. And as you may know, my field and my area is marketing. And so I was going to say, have you had any surprising reactions from others that have found there's a lot of value in your book in understanding both the Latino entrepreneur, their family as a market. It's embedded in this book, not as an intentional target, but have you found any others that have seen your book and then have seen sort of ahas as it relates to the Latino market or the Latino entrepreneur? And I'd be interested in any kind of surprising, unexpected value seen in your book now that you've had a chance to put it together and the conversations that you've had about it since it's come together as a project.
Well, thanks for the feedback and appreciate that. The intent to address your first comments were basically to help people understand that the work is really relational. And I think that's what Dr. Montoya is also relating to or getting across, is that the work is not simply a demographic. You're not just going to sell widgets to a demographic. It's going to be relational. And that is how it will build and have staying power. So that was one of the things that was different. Because the book is new, frankly, we haven't had a lot of feedback yet from people who are reading it because it has not been distributed for very long. Okay, so that's one of the things. But I thought when we were working with Mario, the translator, it was interesting because, of course, he's reading it along with it and doing his work, and he said, "Oh wow, you know there was one chapter in there about family conflict and being excluded from the circle and the importance of the reciprocity and what happens when you leave the circle and come back in, etc." And there was, I don't remember exactly where in what example it was, but he said, oh yeah, he said, that's really true. He says, you know, that's really true with Mexican families, that happens. So there was some validation along the line when somebody says, oh yeah, that's happened. Or I'm the one outside the circle. How did I end up outside? I'm a person who's lived outside the circle.
We all live outside the circle now and then in our families.
Yes, with our families, and often depending on the family, of course, what the family's background is, what the family's, the health of the family, if you get the support or if you get pushback for doing something different, can the circle expand, or is the circle going to really constrict? So I don't, in answer to your question, Dean Montoya, I don't have a specific number of examples from non-Latinos who have read it. But our hope is clearly that as they do and as we get it in their hands, they will be able to see and understand why it's important that if they're going to work with Latinos, they need to understand how it works. Okay.
Yeah, I think lenders in particular are a really interesting and important audience, but also young people and family members and young entrepreneurs. I think this is really valuable because as you well know, we don't always understand how we're situated in life as we grow up, and many of us in blended families, and we don't understand actually what's unique about our own family. And so as this book is actually, I think, a great educational tool for even the non-entrepreneur, and whether they're a Latino family member or not, it's actually important because it expresses something we may not realize about the values of our community, because we may not have ever said them out loud, but they're real and felt. And so I think that's a real value out of the book. So I was intrigued as I read it, seeing characteristics of my mom and dad and their small business. And oh boy.
Exactly. And it was interesting because in writing it, we would work on a section and say, we can share stories of our families, right? Because we know our families and can share those too, what fits and what doesn't. There was something else I was going to say in relation to that, but it's applicable because people will understand the whole concept of the mutualism and the fitting together and the reciprocity. It will change with time. And immigrants experience it when they see their children growing up and becoming dominant in English. They see that loss and what happens to the circle. Marvin has had a lot of experience with students who have opportunities that they turn down because it means leaving the circle. New Mexicans are kind of famous for that, quite frankly. When I got my first job out of school, I was told, wow, you're going to work in Arizona and you're from New Mexico. And I thought, well, yeah. It's like, we can never get anybody from there to come here because nobody wants to leave. And those who aren't from here who come here, after they're here, that they like it, they don't leave either. So it's all of those kinds of things. One of the things that we have had is people in the classes that have attended, because they haven't seen the book, but in the classes, they clearly said, well, I come from a Polish background and a lot of these values are such with our traditional Polish background as well. But there are some distinctions like language and customs and the cultural mores of the particular environment in which people live. And that makes it distinct. It's applicable to more people, but it's specific for the target that we
and just to this thought that I wanted to share is that I think it's important to note that we wanted to make it more than a bilingual, and we wanted to make it a bicultural in the sense that we wanted to emphasize that, I was reading some article that was pointing out to how sometimes immigrants go into lenders, as an example, and they may have within that lending institution that they go into one or two people that speak Spanish, but the next step is to have that one or two or second person, or whomever the employees are, is to understand the culture also. Because again, there's certain things that are that may appear to be weaknesses that are really strengths within this community if you understand what they are.
And that's actually, thank you. That was the point that was escaping me for a moment. And that is, sometimes people are apt to say, well, it has to be this way or that way. But the real strength and functionality for Latinos in the U.S. is that they can cross between those two worlds, so to speak. And we're often in the middle. And we learn how to quickly assess what can we say, what should we not say, how do we say it, how do we present ourselves, what's going on here, and know what is called for in any situation. Makes for wonderful management material.
Yeah.
If you're a manager, because to be able to read a situation and be able to approach an employee, a supervisee, be it in a retail or in a clinical setting, it's really important to be able to do that for the smoothness of what you're trying to do work-wise. So.
Thank you, Drs. Lozano and Rivera. We have a question from Juan Carlos Sanchez, and then Vice President Torres also has a question or comment.
Thank you. Hi, doctors. So first and foremost, thank you. I'm really excited to check out that book. I didn't know it existed until about an hour ago.
Thank you.
I already bookmarked it on the Kindle site. Okay, my question. My question is, I think there's a problem, and essentially is that humans learn self-limiting behaviors during their childhood. And so this typically, or it really leads to this underdeveloped independent thinking, leads to underdeveloped human capital, less willingness to achieve upward mobility, it gets stifled, and of course, unhealthy coping mechanisms are adopted, right? So we have these self-limiting behaviors we acquire, and as Latinos, some are even more specific. And so the question I was having is, and it's based on a theory, is that as humans, we have these behaviors, right? Because it's our limbic, or the reptilian brain, the limbic brain, the neocortex. So we're influenced by these emotions, and which is wonderful, right? Okay, I get this. But what happens when you're speaking that to mom and dad, or, you know, grandma who's hardcore Catholic, and she's like, oh, no, we're not animals, you know, God illuminated us. And so it's kind of hard to, you know, how would you approach this? And maybe you approached this in your book, I don't know. But this is something I've come across trying to pretty much speak through what it is that influences our behaviors.
Good question. And it really addresses the issue of scope of the book, because, you know, we really want to go in depth into all of that. And the book doesn't necessarily go as deeply as we would like. I think what the book does, frankly, is outline lots of opportunities for more writing and work to be done. You raise a really critical concern, very critical concern that we see very often. And that is how a Latino can be raised in a more traditional, with a more traditional set of values, and yet their life changes and takes them into a very different space. So part of it, and I, having spent years in early childhood, part of my thing with educational reform, and we won't get into the depths of that, but parents need to be included in a lot of the undertaking, and alternative ways of learning and learning styles need to be approached. And I think we're hitting the wall against some of this with COVID and having the, and I'm not talking about, you know, connectivity, but I'm talking about the online learning and parents being involved, and how can all of that happen? Well, retention occurs more readily when parents are involved and supportive in the early school years, okay? One of the things that is assessed in the book that's talked about is comfort with the Latino scene. Does the person feel comfortable and participate in traditional activities and fairs and traditions, or do they not? Are they familiar? So that they will know what are the opportunities there? Because in working directly with families, and it's not directly in the book, but given my own personal life and my professional training and experience, parents love their children. I don't want to say unconditionally, unconditionally-ish, shall we say that? Parents have their own opinions and worries as well. They want the best for their child. They want their child to be safe. They want their child to do better than they were able to do. And a lot of it is economically bound with what the parents have experienced. The limits come from what the parents say a child can or cannot do. So if the parent feels comfortable in the school in the early years, they can understand, oh, this is not a threat. This is an opportunity. This is what we came for. And that's what we need to be able to get across to people. Because otherwise, it's okay, you choose, you decide. And it's too big of a decision. And a person who hasn't had the experience of surviving those decisions will say, well, never mind, I just won't do this. I'll stay put and I won't risk it. And we have to be able to help parents to see that encouraging their children by diversifying what they're exposed to is a good thing, because that's the world that they're going to live in. And the purpose of a parent is to train you, to prepare you to do that. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, I wrote down all these notes. It probably gave me like so many more questions. Like,
yes, absolutely.
I understand now. It's too big of a decision for a child to make or start unlearning as they're learning at the same time. Like, how can they say, no, that's bad, don't do that?
Right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Well, and part of it, I guess what I'm trying to get across is, instead of judging this is bad, this is good, which then causes a lot more of racial conflict and racial division, instead to be able to say, this is very good. How do we make it work in this other situation that is not the same as the one we came from? That's really what, I think on a very global level, that's really the healing that we need to do. I realize I'm getting carried away, so I'll stop. But
I love it.
You can tell what I've spent my life doing.
Dr. Lozano, we have two questions. It's 11:58.
Okay.
So, Vice President Torres, if you could ask your question, and if possible, we can get to Director Hayashida's question.
I have a comment and a brief question.
Hi.
The comment is, congratulations, Marvin and Miquela.
Thank you.
And I hope that you can disseminate the book in places where you have high Latino populations, like in Los Angeles, Chicago, San Antonio, Houston, Phoenix. And my question is, when is your next book, and do you have a title for it?
We have several ideas, but thank you for asking.
Currently, we developed a list to go to Hispanic serving institutions.
Right.
And we did them targeted to business departments.
Yes.
And so Kendall Hunt, as you know, because you know Kendall Hunt, they have sent out the general email blast on it very recently, like just earlier this week. It's been slower in getting out. And then it'll be followed by personal outreach. A lot of it's done electronically because we're not going anywhere, which is, it's fine. It's getting us, it will get us where we need to get.
And to take from chapter 1, where we're using those lessons that we've written about, which is, we've made a choice to write this book and to take on what we've wanted to do for many years. And in that came an opportunity to deliver this material, which has opened more opportunities to how we can also go forward in other areas. So we just haven't defined which way to go with that yet. So
thank you for that. Director Hayashida, you'll ask the last comment or question. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. And I don't know if this is really an easy question to answer, but you mentioned that part of your work has been with people who are more recent immigrants. And I'm wondering, and your book, it serves such a wide, variety of people and perspectives. So I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about like the particular challenges of people who are new to the U.S. trying to get oriented, and how you see your book providing the support specifically to this group of folks.
Well, maybe what I can do is share some of the things that we've seen with across the board with immigrants. Yes, they were recent with the emprendedores. Many of them have many challenges, as you would certainly know that. But one area that I am particularly close to is the funding gap area, and that's real important to me, because they come and they've made a decision, and they've already had so much hardship and adversity in their life. And now the thing is, how do they start? And many of them, because they fear going to lending institutions, because lending institutions have a certain criteria that they use. You know, I talk about that when in the classes, when we had the section on financial cash flow and that sort of thing, and they were always really interested in that. But that is a challenge, and part of it is finding someone. And the literature that we've read says that in general, immigrants turn to family, and they turn to close friends, because they fear rejection from going into what is very foreign, a financial institution, and just not feeling comfortable and maybe getting rejected. So clearly it's the funding gaps. Fortunately, there are alternatives. There are alternative lenders. There are community development financial organizations in the state. And part of it is in education, is understanding that they're there, and learning about them and going forward. So it is in addition to language barriers, I would point to that one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know we're out of time.
No, it's please.
No, I was just going to say the other thing, the other big thing that jumps out as well, clearly the financial part, without question, needs to be addressed, is the adjustment to a very different life if they've come from something very different. That's the other part, and it's a bunch of moving parts is what it is.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you everybody for this, this really great discussion. I know on behalf of Dean Montoya, I know that there are many moving parts that are trying to have a discussion at the university and at the Anderson level about financial inclusion and about connection to community. And I want to extend my thanks to Dean Montoya for taking time out of her schedule to ask the question. Do you have any closing comments, Dean Montoya?
No, I just want to say thank you for your hard work on this. I think it's incredibly important, and I look forward to helping make sure that we create access to this great material, because I think it's a really fantastic practical guide, and that's important that we partner in doing things like that. So I hope that you will consider us a partner in that work. It's incredibly valuable, and I think this is going to help change conversation and do what we need to do, which is we need more small businesses to start and thrive, and especially to rebuild New Mexico's economy right now. So this is incredibly timely, and I appreciate what your contribution is to our community. So thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
very
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And on that note, Drs. Lozano and Rivera, thank you very much. Thank you very much to LAII and to all of you for joining the call. We hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.